Good day, we've got a double-decker video here for you. So first we're going to take a look at my winter forecast for this upcoming winter. We're going to take a look at what factors we should look at for our winter and where we should check our, and like what patterns we need to look for. And you'll even get like an ultimate national map for what I think our winter should look like. And then if you want to stick through the winter weather forecast, we'll be looking at our pattern for the later half of this month. And you might even get a brief look at Halloween. So that'll be some interesting stuff later on. And here's some general factors that we look for in the course of making a winter weather forecast. We look at the PDL, which is in the northeastern Pacific. We look at the NAO region, which measures some atmospheric factors off the coast of Greenland, and then we look at the ENSO, which is where you have your El Nino and your La Nina, so on and so forth. It's down in that region. So here's a current look at our sea surface temperature anomalies and how much warmer and colder than average that we are currently. And through our ENSO region, we've generally got a neutral going on here. There's not really any El Nino or La Nina at the moment. Last winter we had a weak El Nino, which played an impact into our winter this winter. That should not be the case. We have all this very warm water here, which would indicate a positive PDL. And we've got our positive NAO running through here. And here's a look at the NAO. Basically, a negative phase would be better for us because the negative phase would typically get you ridging through Greenland. And this, in all the way up in Greenland, is where the polar vortex would typically be. So if you've got ridging here, then it means that you're pushing the polar vortex down into the US, which would make for a colder winter in the eastern United States. But unfortunately, that pattern doesn't look like it's going to be that prevalent this winter. This winter we're more looking at a positive NAO, which is not so great for us because right down here you can tell that it makes the Midwest and the Northeast generally warmer than what they would typically be. And that can obviously serve as a major detriment to snow, which we all love. So, here's a look at the PDO. Typically, you're looking for this horseshoe, basically, of warmer than average temperatures in the Pacific. Like, we have more than a horseshoe currently. We basically just have this giant blob of warmer than average sea surface temperatures. And while the NAO doesn't look so great for us on the other side, here this PDO should really help us, because having a positive PDO here creates ridging off of Alaska, and that typically forces warmer, drier air into the western US while pushing cooler air into the eastern US. So that should be a benefactor for the Midwest and the East Coast. And our ENSO region isn't really going to have much impact on this winter, but it's worth looking at the La Nina and the El Nino patterns anyway. As I mentioned earlier, last winter we had a weak El Nino, which created warmer and drier conditions over much of the country. And here's some ENSO spaghetti plots. Basically, we're taking a look at how much the ENSO region differs from the average temperature. And all three of our average lines here, the blue, the red, and the green, all three are basically in this range where it's cooler than 0.5, so it's not super warm, but it's warmer than average. This is what you would call a warm neutral winter. And now we've got some of our favorites, our model runs. CFS here is basically giving us a warm neutral in the ENSO region. It's got this positive NAO pattern going on, and it's got this big warm blob of Pacific warm water, which we saw all the way back at the start of the video. And this is the NMME, which basically does a similar thing to a CFS, telling a very similar note here, with warm neutral in the ENSO region, and in a positive PDO here. And a look back at the NAO, my bad. Okay, so here's some analogs. Here's some years that I think happen to be similar to the pattern that we're looking at for this winter. We've got 2016, 2017, we've got 2002, 2003. Both of these generally had a warm neutral ENSO and had a positive PDO. So let's see how these winters looked, right? So the bad thing with those analogs is that it creates some is that both had very warm winters for basically everybody but the northeastern US. Like, this map is basically all kinds of orange and red. Basically a blowtorch. That would be bad. But the precip map is much more all over. Like, there's not really any set pattern for the precip, but that's harder to really nail down typically than the temperature is. And this was the winter weather outlook, which the NOAA published back on the 17th, and they're telling a very similar picture with the temperatures warmer than average through the south, with some close to averaging out temperatures in the Midwest. I'm guessing that's from our PDO. And then when it comes to precip, they're going with below average in California and in the south central United States, while they're going with wetter conditions in the Midwest and northern Great Plains. So here's ultimately what I have. So when it comes to temperatures, we're looking at average for much of the Midwest and much of the Northeast, much of the interior Northeast anyway. I think it'll be slightly warmer than average through the Southeast throughout the East Coast, and I think it'll be much warmer than average out west thanks to our PDO. Meanwhile, when it comes to a precip, I think we'll have a pattern that more delves on the northern side, where we have storms that basically slide over this PDO ridge and just sweep through here. And this should create a wetter winter in the Midwest, while in the South, in the south central and western US, this generally results in a drier winter. So here's some common winter storm tracks that we see. So here we've got the color that matches up to the storm. And I think the red and the blue will probably be our most common paths this winter, our most common storm tracks. Last winter we saw a lot of storms which took this yellow path. I don't think that'll necessarily be the case this winter. So that's a marked change. And here's some things. So ultimately, in short, I think this winter can make a run for average if the PDO helps us. Otherwise, snowfall should be below average. So now that we've gotten the winter weather forecast I'm out of the way, there's some quick resources. So if you want to bookmark those, you can check sea surface temperatures to get a look at our winter patterns and check some model runs and stuff. Cool stuff. Anyway, let's take a quick dive here into our weather pattern. So here's a late October overview. We've got generally temps in the 60s. We've got a stronger system from the Gulf of Mexico coming up later this week. And some of you probably saw this on the local news. They were talking about some Halloween snowstorm of sorts. So we'll take a closer look at that too. So when it comes to a white Halloween, as in having snow, we've had only one white Halloween on record, which was in 1993. We had 6 inches. We really have a lack of confidence this far out for anything with Halloween. Most of it at this point is speculation, and many of the main models are just flipping through certain possibilities. And you ended up seeing it on the local news because one of the major models, the European model, ended up giving it to us. And to illustrate our model issues and why I can't really tell you anything on this, here's a look at 2 GFS runs. On the left side you have the earlier run, and on the right side you have the later run. And this earlier run was a midnight run on the 22nd. This was a evening run on the 22nd. And as you can see, these are basically total opposites. On this early day run, you had a large cyclone. You had a large cyclonic system per se over Ontario, which pulled down some cold air and resulted in some snow for the Big West. Well, this newer run basically has nothing. In this region, and has high pressure dominating much of the US. That's a similar case with this one. You can see the contrast in the models there. And this was the one that ended up making the news. This Euro run from the morning of the 21st. Looking at the run from the morning of the 22nd, you've basically got something totally different going on here. And here's the rundown of what all we know. We don't really know much. We know Halloween will probably be colder than it typically would be, and a storm system should bring in that cool down, but we don't know anything else. We know nothing on timing, nothing on snow totals, nothing on precip totals, nothing. So to end this off, I'm just going to stick my social media handles here because my time in high school was sadly limited. And thank you for tuning in.